that there are malign Russian actors at play here. General Hemeti and his rapid support force have had connections with Wagner for many years. There's Russian involvement in the gold mines in Sudan, and Russia has recently, just in the past couple of months, signed a big deal to put a major naval base in Sudan on the Red Sea port. So I am very concerned about the Russian impact.
Well, let's turn our attention internationally now and to Sudan, where it is understood that the UK government is now planning to evacuate diplomats from its embassy there as soon as feasible. Ministers are keen to help British officials leave the country, where hundreds of people have been killed as clashes between the Sudanese army and a rival paramilitary group reach a ninth day. Well, joining us now is the Conservative MP Vicky Ford, chair of the parliamentary group on Sudan, a former Minister for Development in Africa. Vicky Ford, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
There have been complaints from British citizens in Sudan that they are not getting the sort of support, consular support, that other nationals are getting. Do you agree with them?
Well, it is an extremely difficult situation. It's really worrying, and actually the situation for people across the country is really deeply, deeply troubling. The Foreign Office has set up an emergency crisis centre, which I know is operating 24/7, and it's extremely important that any British citizens in Sudan make sure that they have registered their details on a website. There's also a helpline set up, and I know that the MOD and the Foreign Office have been looking at a number of different scenarios. It's obviously very important to try to get our people out, but especially those in the who are associated with the embassy. But that obviously needs to be done in a safe way, and it's a very troubling situation on the ground. My understanding is that British citizens aren't being specifically targeted in this situation. So the advice to them is to make sure that they stay in as safe a place as possible, but do make sure that they've registered their details with the crisis centre through their online portal.
I have read, I haven't been able to confirm this, but at the time that the fighting started, both the British ambassador and his deputy was out of the country. That seems rather surprising.
Well, it obviously was over the Easter period, and obviously this was not expected. The situation in Sudan is a really, really difficult situation. It's a country with a very large population. Over 15 million of the people in Sudan are already in need of humanitarian aid before this fighting even started, and obviously the fighting will have made it even more difficult to get aid to those people. In the first weekend, 3 people who were working for the World Food Programme were killed, and I've seen with my own eyes how important the work of the World Food Programme is in Sudan. So it is absolutely tragic, but it is a very fast-moving situation. This fighting only broke out a week ago.
What do you think the stakes are? Because some are viewing this as a civil war between 2 ambitious generals, one of whom says he stands for democracy. Others, including an article in the Times by Roger Boys, have suggested that actually the insurgents here are really, being encouraged by the Russians, and particularly being encouraged by the Wagner Group of mercenaries. What do you make of it?
I believe that there are malign Russian actors at play here. General Hemeti and his rapid support force have had connections with Wagner for many years. There's Russian involvement in the gold mines in Sudan, and Russia has recently, just in the past couple of months, signed a big deal to put a major naval base in Sudan on the Red Sea port. So I am very concerned about the Russian impact. I'm also concerned that this fighting is likely to lead to even more people becoming displaced. We know that when the genocide happened nearly 20 years ago, this year's the 20th anniversary, 2 million people were displaced. We know that Sudan is also a significant source of migrants moving towards Western Europe and then on to the UK as well. And as more people become displaced, you will get more migration, and that could impact on us as well in the UK. Internationally, the UK has got a really important role to play here. We are the pen holder at the UN. I know that our diplomats work really, really closely with diplomats in many different countries in this area, including with the African Union, with the UN, with many Gulf partners, with the US, with the EU. It is difficult for us militarily because we don't have military on the ground like we had in Afghanistan. So in order to try and get an evacuation, that's a different scenario that we have here. There isn't a safe airport. We don't have our own military presence there. But I do know that we're looking at all options and contingencies to support the British nationals there, as well as trying to urge for peace, urge for a ceasefire, and keep hopes alive of being able to move back towards a democratic transition, towards a civilian-led government.
Looking more broadly in Africa, but of course including Sudan and what you've just said, do you feel that we in the UK and perhaps in Europe and the West are actually paying enough attention to Africa? Because it does appear that both Russia and China are very actively engaged, both politically and in terms of exploiting resources.
Well, the UK is a major international partner and voice on African issues. We've played a leading role in trying to get international support for the food situation, the hunger crisis in the Horn of Africa. I myself visited Ethiopia when I was the minister last October and worked really hard to try to get the ceasefire to the civil war in Tigray. There's very, very troubling situation in many African countries that it always appeared to me to be a Russian strategy to try and destabilize even further countries that were already unstable. The Russians know perfectly well that destabilization can create even more chaos.